Within every human reality is a certain amount of pain. Pain is the separation from and longing for something very specific. And at the deepest level, this pain is separation from and longing for a sense of wholeness, a healing, a sense of unity, of reconnection with the larger self, to transcend the consciousness or the myopia of the consciousness on the isolated, linear, cultured, egoic mind, and reassemble the links to the larger body of which we are a part, be that physical, emotional, mental, financial, energetic, the larger body in which we are ecologically nested. And in a materialist cult, it is, of course, easiest to see that link physically. You don't exist without your parents. You don't exist without your grandparents. You don't exist without your entire line of relatives. The present moment doesn't exist without the moment before it, without the moment before that. The entire predication of this moment rests on the foundation of moments 4 billion years in the past that, if they did not occur, would not lead us here. Every object in our environment can be linked inextricably to every other object in the known universe. There is not a single object in the universe, in the multiverse, that has no connection to any other object. Whether it's linked with the shared habit of gravity, whether it's linked with the shared molecular structure, whether it's linked with a fractally repeating pattern where a smaller object becomes a larger object, becomes a larger object in essentially the same pattern, just at smaller and different scales. This shirt alone links me directly and indirectly to more than 1 billion people. And it links to the past and it links to the future, because this shirt doesn't disappear. No energy is created or destroyed in physics. It simply takes a different shape. And it has a momentum. In this case, a cotton turtleneck has a set of habits that are relatively predictable, varying only with direct sun exposure, moisture, etc. We know what this will become as it decomposes back into something more fundamental than this shirt. And whether it's the millions of people that had something to do with coloring and dyeing, or shipping and manufacturing, or the development of the petroleum-based engine which transported this from one country to another, this shirt is linked directly and indirectly to every other object in the known universe. We are so inextricably connected in fact, and we are so dissociated in consciousness. Meaning, the only object that we know of that is capable of rendering these billions of connections invisible, to create the illusion of isolation and dissociation, is cultured human consciousness. And we long and feel separate from the unity with the larger ecology of which we are a part. It's easy to see physically if you do a little bit of digging. It's no less easy to see emotionally. We just don't study feelings as a feminine trait. But in this emotional life, it was ascertained to the surprise of emotionally illiterate researchers in an emotionally illiterate culture that emotions function as a virus and ripple out as a resonance like a sound, affecting those around it, around every feeling in proportion to their proximity, their vulnerability, and their empathy. Every human experience has a certain amount of pain. And the purpose of all pain is to teach the repositioning, the realigning, and the repair of the pain. All pain communicates separation from and longing for something. And its message ringing through the halls of consciousness is that something is wrong. Something is not right. And responsibility and love and the law of empathy and compassion dictate that this pain be attended to, that this pain be learned from, that we respond to the call, that we listen to the bell. As we reposition ourselves, physically, emotionally, mentally, in this dynamic of pain, as we return to wholeness, as we embrace our interconnectedness in a loving dance, in an empathic dance of partnering, that pain subsides. It is the essence of responsibility, which is the distinguishing factor between a child, an adolescent, and an adult. An adult takes responsibility. An adult expresses the ability and the willingness to respond, to reduce unnecessary levels of pain, to act within the latitude of discretionary freedom, to reduce pain and elevate well-being, elevate sustainability, elevate the return to wholeness. The ability and willingness to respond to pain begins with recognizing there's pain. Recognizing 1 to 10, the pain is this loud. Recognizing the pain appears to be in this domain. The pain is loudest when I'm at work. The pain is loudest when I contemplate the future of my marriage. The pain is loudest when I look at the lies that I'm living and telling the people I care about in my life. recognizing the general location of pain. Once it is recognized, the pattern of pain can be understood, can be listened to, can be diagnosed. All diagnosis is the recognition of an imbalanced pattern. So you have the symmetry, the grace, the ease of the whole, of the sphere. And then you have a poor relationship with that whole. There's an off-center. If you're diagnosing a car problem and you start hearing a clunking as you're driving, da, 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 da. Something in the wheels, weight has gotten off to one side. You start feeling this jerking motion. There's something interrupting. There is a dis-ease in the flow of symmetry. Something is not spinning, not moving, not interacting in the right way. And most of the time, if you have a flat tire and it's loppy on one side, or the tire is balanced, heavily to one side, most of the time, that will get worse without attention, without a response. You get a flat tire, you just keep driving. Pretty soon the hub of the wheel is ruined as well. You keep driving, that gets worn down. The other aspects of the car have to work harder to compensate for that malady in the wheel, and then pretty soon you might have engine trouble or overheating because everything else has to work harder to compensate for an unresponded to disease. You chop your finger off, obvious dissociation from wholeness. Now this bit of the finger is separate from the rest of the finger. It cries out, I want to be whole. I want to be an integrated system. Instead, I'm a little bit separated from the rest, and I'm in pain. You do absolutely nothing about that. You start bleeding out, maybe it gets infected. You certainly don't get to put the finger back on. You get infected. You don't do anything about that. Pain levels go up. You don't do anything about that. Suddenly you're driving poorly, if you can drive at all in that situation, because you're in so much pain. You start taking addictive medication and don't do anything about that. Your entire reality can spin down through the unwillingness to respond effectively to the message, to the teaching of pain. Now, understanding or diagnosing the pattern is obvious, and you can think of a wheel. The sphere is the most graceful and whole shape in the universe for a number of reasons. First of all, it integrates in one shape the masculine and the feminine, because a sphere is refracted out of an infinite number of lines, but it's also one. So you have the paradox and polarity of the lines, because when you build a sphere in the computer, you don't build a sphere. You build a very large number of points and lines, and out of it the sphere emerges. And so this is approaching unity through the masculine, through the infinite distinctions that become as one, as opposed to the one that can be chopped up into infinite distinctions. The sphere is also, if you think of, what object would you like to transport energy with? Would you like a square? Would you like a square bicycle wheel? How about a triangle? How about a double tetrahedron? Is there any geometric shape you'd like to put on your bicycle to allow you to gracefully and efficiently move from one location to another? And the answer is no, a sphere. You want a circle, you want a wheel, you don't want a square, because the wheel is, the round wheel is more graceful and less painful than the bumpy ride that is triangular wheels. I mean, triangular wheels are incredibly bumpy. They're incredibly painful. But if you diagnose triangular wheels, if every time you move a foot forward and this huge wheel bangs down on the ground and reverberates, and you have to work like hell to pedal up and then get up and it bangs down. If you're diagnosing a triangular wheel, you correlate the fact that when it bangs down and jerks every bone in your body, it's going from the point to the flat part suddenly. There's not a lot of grace in there, is it? It's just this or it's this. It's one or the other. It's polarizing. It's high up and then it collapses down. I'm going up and down and it's violent. It's noisy, metal triangular wheels. It's just painful. So you get off the bike and you look and it's like, I don't like this. What if I cut off a bit of the triangle? It's elongated over here, but it's flat here. It's asymmetrical. It's not the same. It's a violent transition. So what if we soften that transition? We cut off the points of the triangle and we put the points that we cut off in the middle area. Well, now we've got a 6-pointed star rather than a triangle. You have instantly reduced the pain, the volatility, the violence of the transition point by 50%. You realize I'm in the right direction. I'm going in the right direction. Pain is going down. Well, what if I cut off all the points on the 6-pointed star halfway and then put those in the places between? So it's now a 12-pointed star. Again, a 50% reduction if this is done symmetrically. A 50% reduction. And a 12 to a 20, now we're getting somewhere. 12-pointed star to a 24-pointed star, cutting off all those points and putting them in. Now we're getting the circle. And so pain is the teacher. It's not dogmatic. There's nothing, you need to rely on some 2,000-year-old book. The pain goes down. The pain subsides. And motion, the grace of motion, is facilitated. Suddenly it becomes possible with a sphere on a flat surface for a single human being to move thousands of pounds gracefully. They just have to push it. If it's a perfectly flat sphere and a perfectly flat floor, it's like you can move dozens of tons. Whereas if it was one triangle that was 800 pounds, you couldn't lift it up and move it over with one. It becomes graceful, becomes fun. A little bit of energy for a lot of impact, as long as that impact is moving in a symmetrical direction, in a healing or whole direction. If you're moving in that direction, the pain subsides. And this is the essence of an adult. An adult recognizes the patterns in their environment, diagnoses the patterns in their environment, understands the patterns in their environment so they can diagnose them, and responds with healing, with joy, with pain down, well-being up. every single human being in the history of humanity has wanted to feel sustainably good and not wanted to feel sustainably bad. Everyone wants to feel good. No one wants to feel bad. Now, the only splices and distinctions are when you get into volatility, meaning unregulated chaos and volatility is such a low psychological state that many people would prefer a constant mediocrity to uncontrolled shock going from good to bad. In other words, many people would rather not be in any relationship at all than to have a partner who's nice to you today for no particular reason, and then they hit you the next day for no particular reason, and then they're nice again the next day. It's like, I'll give up the nice stuff to not have the bad stuff, and I'll give up both to not feel helpless and out of control. And so the being out of control in shock and in pain is the lowest human state, which means that people will consciously walk away from feeling good if they connect it with a volatile pattern that also leads them to feel bad. Why do people walk away from drugs when they're able to do so? As it feels good, and then it feels bad. And I'm not able to master that dynamic, and it's starting to feel bad more, and I don't want it to, but it is. I'm not in control. So people will prioritize mastery over feeling good in a volatile state. Every teenager learns the art in an abuse culture of a studied apathy, a studied cynicism, and a studied depression and loathing of their parents. Now, you offer them an ice cream cone or something, an opportunity where they could feel great, and they will resist the urge. You can catch a teenager sometimes. You tickle them a little bit, you do this, and you catch them. It would be so easy for them to go up into joy, into wonder, into childlike curiosity for a few minutes. But then the stunning stupidity of their lives would come crashing down on them, and the helplessness to deal with these fucked up parents would, and they would lose it, and they'd feel out of control. I'm being jumped around by my environment. And so they resist. They studiously hang on to disgust. Even when there's nothing particularly disgusting around, they have to work at it. It's like, oh my gosh, remember how fucked up my parents are, right? Lovely countryside, lovely food, but it's all going to end terribly. And so they'll hold on to it because they're not empowered. They're not empowered in that relationship to have control of a high state sustainably. So they don't want it, because it just reminds them of their helplessness. And helplessness with shock and pain is one of the lowest human states available. So in that one context, you will see people consciously choosing to be miserable in a stable state that they have control over a volatility of feeling good, then feeling terrible, feeling good, and not knowing what the fuck is going on. And so we all want to feel good sustainably with mastery, and we all don't want to feel bad sustainably with mastery. That is the highest expression of human intelligence. If you are an intelligent human being and you take time, money, and natural resources, and you have competency, you will use those natural resources, that time, that money, to facilitate sustainable well-being. every intelligent person in time uses the energy available to them to sustainably increase their well-being, even if it's revenge. It's not a very high level of competency, because what revenge says is, I don't know how to feel good sustainably myself, but it feels better to make you feel like I do, particularly if you cut off my arm. And I don't know how to get the arm back on. I'm an amputee now. I'm never going to have that back. I don't know how to get it back, and you did it maliciously. You did it to save $200. You betrayed me. You did this and this, the other. I can't get this arm back. Now, in that state, sometimes it feels better to maim the other person, just to let them know I feel completely helpless to recover all that my life was going to be before. And I feel in an emotionally illiterate, in an emotionally ignorant culture. I don't know how to get over that. Every time I look at this arm, I hate myself for trusting you, and I hate you for betraying me. I don't know how to get over that. I'm stuck, feeling rotten in this area. Well, in that domain, the helplessness and stuckness of feeling bad emotionally and physically, and perhaps this goes into financially. I can't do my job. Now my finances are hurting. Now I can't pay my medical bills. Now my body is hurting. You did this to me. You're violating the rule of interconnectedness. You ruined $5 million of my life for $200, you sociopath. And so in that dynamic, to cut off their leg, to use time, money, and resources to make someone else feel bad, to remind them of the law of empathy, the law of interconnectivity. It's a little bit of a paradoxical reminder, because if you understand that law yourself, you understand that some part of the whole violated you, and you want them to acknowledge that you matter, and they don't. They're in a sociopathic state, which is what all cults that are highly traumatic reduce their citizenry to, a sociopathic state. But it feels powerful, doesn't it? You can hurt them the way they hurt you, so you're not helpless, so you're transcending the helplessness, so you feel a little better. I may not be able to stop you or anyone else ruining the rest of my life, but I can take revenge. I can let them know what it feels like. And in doing so, I can feel less alone and less powerless and less worthless. Because that's the message when an abuser sells out $5 million of your life. What's really important to you, that's the message. For $200. They're saying that their $200 is worth more than your $5 million. That their feeling of well-being is so much more important than your feeling of well-being that yours sells for pennies on the dollar. Just because you're not them. That's it. That's the only criteria. And this sociopathic state in myopia is very, very destructive. And one of the things that wakes people out of that is lots of pain, including revenge. Meaning if you have someone in a sociopathic state going around causing massive amounts of harm because they're completely numb, and one of those people comes back and beats the shit out of them and says, you will be beaten up if you do not respect your impact on this ecology. I do exist, and your bruises are evidence of the fact that my feelings do matter. Not because you acknowledge that my feelings matter, but because your self-absorption means that your bruises matter, and my feelings led me to punch the shit out of you. I guess my feelings do matter if you don't want to be punched again. So a sociopath learns through the language of pain, and it's a very, very small reality. The sociopathic state is the most isolated and pain-based state. No competent human being chooses a sociopathic state because it's no fun and because it's myopic. It's a state of complete emotional disconnection from the entire universe. It doesn't get more sick and painful and lonely, but it's also numb. So the pain of being isolated is also numb. And so in that sociopathic state, it is a good survival state. It will let you survive in a sociopathic environment, but it is not fun, which is why no competent human being would choose it. Meaning if you have the option to feel vast amounts of joy, love, and well-being, and you know how to get there, and you know how to help other people not hurt you, you're going to do that. Because if you're innocent and trying around, you're going to try being sociopathic, and it's not a lot of fun. Then you're going to try being joyful in interconnectedness. Oh, that's more fun. You're going to try making love. That's more fun. You're going to try hitting someone and being hit. It's not as fun. Fun is the only self-evident state. It's fun because fun is fun. Fun is the only self-referential intelligent state. You don't do fear because it's fearful. It's not attractive. You do fear because there's no alternative, because you got to learn something. You do pain because you got to learn. But you don't say, oh, I can do pain, so let's do pain because I can do pain. But fun has that self-referential thing. It's more fun to be happy than it is to be miserable. So let's be happy because it's more fun. And the key is sustainability. It's obviously very fun to irresponsibly spend your parents' credit card debt and not pay for any of it. But it stops being fun when you're on the street. When your parents lose the house, it might be great fun to cook in the kitchen and not clean anything up. It's wonderful. But then you don't have a kitchen anymore until you clean up. And so so sustainable fun is the only self-referential object that is intelligent. Meaning your intelligence can be measured directly, as well as, which includes your competence. Your intelligence, including competence, can be assessed by how much sustainable fun you are capable of generating for yourself and the larger ecology of which you are a part. And of course, there's a lot of complexity of this because the performance of fun, the mask, the pretending that everything is okay when it is not a state of competence. One pretends that everything is great and I'm feeling great when I'm not, and puts on a good show of it, when A, one does not know how to change the state with mastery, B, one judges oneself, which is not a very fun state, for being in pain or failing or not knowing what you're doing, which is what happens in a chauvinistic culture. And 3, you believe in a sociopathic environment that if you reveal your need, your helplessness, your lack of ability to get out of this state, you believe that you will be hurt more rather than helped with dignity. By hurt, I mean, If someone says, "Oh, you're such a loser, I guess I'll give you a hand," that's being hurt, because you've just lost all your social rank and value in a cult hierarchy. And the reason the person is helping, perhaps, is not because they empathize with you, but because they're wanting to create a vertical cult dynamic in which they are superior to you and you owe them. And that makes them feel more secure when they do not know how to feel secure in a more beautiful way of loving and being fun. And so it becomes mathematically self-evident, the more equations you do, that intelligence, including competency, including love, is directly affected by the degree of sustainable fun in the individual and in the cult to which they belong, as reflected in the environment which is conducive to fun. Now, this is incredibly complex in an abuse cult. Meaning, in a chauvinistic abuse cult, there are so many cross-wirings and counterintuitive swerves in this dynamic that it becomes very difficult to see the pattern. For example, in a chauvinistic cult, it is viewed as lower rank to receive or need something than it is to give or meet the need. And so which is more fun? Receiving and losing all your cult ranking, or giving and gaining cult ranking? It's a lose-lose. You'd want to receive and gain cult ranking. That would be more fun, wouldn't it? But that doesn't happen. And then you think of being emotional. Which is more fun, being highly emotional in joy and beauty and ecstasy, or being cynical? Well, highly emotional. But in a cult that says you're too emotional and punishes you for being highly emotional, then suddenly being highly emotional is more painful and less fun than being cynical. Because if you're cynical, you're considered mature and sophisticated in a cult that doesn't know the difference between betrayal and sociopathic coping mechanisms and adulthood. They have nothing to do with one another. In an abuse cult, people will go from innocence into bitterness, cynicism, and hostility and apathy. But in an ignorant cult, there's no distinction made between symptoms of abuse and adulthood, because all the grown-ups in an abuse cult are traumatized to a point of pain-based coping mechanism, and rather than admit inadequacy in a cult that shames the individuals for not knowing something. In an abuse cult, the feminine is shamed and the unknown is feminine. The unknown is bigger than the known, by definition. There is and never will be a human being who understands even 1% of all there is to know. So the unknown is bigger than the known. The unknown is also in that state of mystery that is feminine. In a chauvinistic cult, not to know is to be inferior to those who know, which is why you see the pathological arrogance of the know-it-all who spends endless days, studying Trivial Pursuit minutia and nonsense that has nothing to do with anything. And they can quote, no, that bridge was built in 1812 rather than in 1814. You're wrong. I'm better than you. I know more than you. Okay, 1818 instead of 1812. Thank you so much for this important information about 2 years in 1812 about a bridge. Well, we've got to know things in this cult. So in a chauvinistic cult, not knowing is shameful, is lower rank. So the innocence of saying, "Oh, I don't know that. Tell me this. Tell me that," is is butchered. Because as soon as you say, I don't know this, they say, you don't know this? In an ignorant, stupid, abuse cult that doesn't teach you a goddamn thing, you didn't know this? Oh, how crazy you are. Let's transfer all the stupidity of the cult onto you. And furthermore, now let's humiliate you. We'll all dance around you as little abusers, having learned successfully from their parents to dance around and humiliate the person who did the most intelligent thing around, admitted that they don't know 99% of all there is to know, to try and find out. But instead of, here it is, it's humiliation, deranking, teasing. Did you hear what so-and-so didn't know? So-and-so didn't know where to put his penis for his first sexual encounter. Can you believe it? In a cult where all the grown-ups look away, use innuendo, change the subject, and look terrified about talking about basic biology. In a religious system that shames the very thing that's supposed to be in the image of God, in the religious system, in a cult of teasing pathological misinformation and stupidity, an individual didn't know what they would have no way of knowing if they weren't raised in an intelligent cult that would teach them these things. What's ignorant in this dynamic is why anyone is surprised. Meaning you have to be very, very, very dumb to be surprised that someone doesn't know what the entire cult is colluding to misinform, deny, and run away from. Why would you know? I mean, and then we turn on these individuals and pretend that there's something wrong with them for not knowing. And of course, the obvious thing, if you look at the pain, okay, who hasn't gone through that pain in our cult? Who hasn't felt ashamed of not knowing? How many students don't learn because they're afraid of the humiliation that comes from admitting that they don't know? How expensive and painful is chauvinism? How expensive and painful is stupidity that is protected by transferring it to the only person in the cult that can't do anything about it, the new child, the new individual that has, they're not writing the laws that are this dumb. They are at the effect of grown-ups who have decided, why should we teach young children what we never learned? We felt like morons in high school. Why shouldn't they feel like morons in high school? Why would we teach them all the things that, it would have been nice if we'd learned how to drive in high school. Let's not teach them that. It would have been nice. Why not just abuse the next generation the way I was abused, so that I don't feel jealous of my own children, of this and that and the other. Let's get them. This is a state of chronic helplessness. It is a state of chronic stupidity, very low levels of intelligence, as reflected by very high levels of chronic, predictable, and easy to remedy pain. So the difference between a grown-up, someone in a large body reenacting an abuse contract, and an adult is enormous. An adult recognizes, responds, understands the dynamic, and takes steps to minimize pain, unnecessary pain for themselves and those around them. Now, the response is based on a hypothesis. So we have a paradigm, we have a value hierarchy, we have and this value hierarchy and paradigm leads to a hypothesis of a map of reality. Now, it's not reality, it's a map of reality. And the map then leads to a strategy. If we look at a map and we say the road goes from here to there, then we say, okay, I'm going to head this way on the road. That's the strategy. Now, the map is not the road. If it's useful, it's a hypothesis that correlates with reality. Then you have competency of implementation. Going back to amputation, if one of your legs is amputated and you don't have a crutch, hopping along that road is going to be your protocol perhaps, but it's not as competent as if you have two legs, and not as competent as you have a bicycle, and not as competent if the bicycle is electric. The effortlessness with which you can move and implement your strategy is a reflection of intelligence and competence. And then the question is, does it work? Do you arrive where you want to go? Or is it a faulty map? Meaning the map was perfect except one small detail. Right as I was following the road about to get to my destination, the road terminated with a 3-mile violent river and no bridge, and then continued on the other side. That little detail was left out of the map. Well, it's a pretty big detail. One little 3-mile river that makes it means the entire journey was a waste of time. Because the bridge that isn't on the map is 10 miles upstream, and you're not going to get across. So even though this was the shortest path, something was left out of the map. And you hit it. And this is the most frightening thing about living in a shame-based, secret-based, insane cult, is the map is faulty. All kinds of pink elephants in the room are not on the map. So it would be intelligent to go and do this and this and this if this was actually the case. It would be intelligence to just move on as if nothing happened if it wasn't for trauma in the biological system. But trauma in the biological system is a 3-mile river, and you can't cross it without a bridge. And you certainly can't cross it if it is not labeled on the map. Imagine the cruelty, which is a daily experience in our cult, of your parents getting to that 3-mile river in which you know you're going to drown. You just put your hand in it, swept away. And they're pretending there's no river. You go on ahead, boy. We're not going any further. They instinctively feel what's not on the cult map. You go on ahead. You go off and be bullied alone at school. You go off and carry on. It'll be fine. As their child is swept away in the rapids. Why did you get swept away in the rapids? Because it was too big for me. No. Real men don't get swept away in rapids. It's that, and you have this absolute pathological cruelty of asking people to go to their death, their violation, their deterioration, their trauma, without even having the decency to acknowledge the massive amounts of energy that are not on the map, that are having far more impact on the ultimate destination than the things politely put on the map. Oh, here's a nice little place to have tea. That's on the map. Fine. Here's a place you can have Indian food. That's on the map. Fine. 3-mile rapid river. No one's talking about it. Everyone's pretending it isn't there. Gossip and whisper and innuendo. Pure stupidity. Pathological cruelty. We know these objects are on the map. And in a shame-based cult, we don't have the decency to tell our children. We're too afraid to face them. And we're too cowardly to admit to our children, that we are afraid to face these dynamics, and therefore we are going to leave them to be swept out to sea by them alone, maybe secretly crying, but not telling them it's inevitable. You go down this road, you're going to hit a 3-mile river. The best I can do is tell you I hit that river and I don't know how to get across, and I've spent my entire life in mediocrity because I didn't want to admit that I didn't know how to get across. I didn't know who to ask for help. Everyone around me was going to shame me if I asked, and I put my foot in and I realized I would drown, and so I pretended I didn't want to go any further. I was content. I was going to this destination, but I was content settling down just this side of the river. All to accommodate the pathological ignorance and cruelty of a cult that shames you for not knowing and does not transcend the shame in the grown-up to help the child forge the rivers that will allow the cult to grow, that will increase the probability field. Now, every paradigm leading to a map of reality, leading to a value hierarchy, leading to strategy and developing the competency to implement it has a probability field. It has a probability field. The probability field of not having a sign warning you of a dangerous mudslide around the corner in a road that drives 60 miles an hour is pileups. Maybe 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 20 cars, maybe 1 in 100 cars. People are going to get killed in those cars until a sign is erected that says, danger, this. And so in an intelligent culture, we put the sign up to protect human life. And similarly, a cult that is traumatically illiterate, that is relationally illiterate, that hides and suppresses parental abuse because the teachers don't want to get in a fight with the parents, the teachers don't want to get in a fight with the principal who doesn't want to get in a fight with the parents do not want their child understanding the language of abuse because that would humiliate the parents in an abuse cult, in a chauvinistic cult in which the parent is presumed to lose rank if their child knows more than they do. So they actively sabotage the knowledge of their child so they can feel superior to their children in an abuse chauvinistic cult in which knowing is more valuable than not knowing. And so thus we have sustained chronic ignorance leading to inevitable harm, inevitable pain, which is then shamed. Because if you're protecting a pink elephant in the room, and that's more important than the human beings and their well-being, you shame people around this, and you sacrifice the people to protect the shame. You sacrifice the well-being to protect the secret, to protect the pattern of ignorance and stupidity. Because in a chauvinistic cult, if you feel pain, you are less than someone who puts on the front of feeling great, less than someone in a sociopathic state. If a girlfriend in high school in a sociopathic cult dumps a boy publicly, and he says, whatever, you're not much to talk about anyway. See you around. He doesn't lose rank. If he bursts into tears and says, why are you deliberately and cruelly hurting me for the intelligent choice to be more vulnerable with you? In other words, I didn't make the mistake here. I chose to be more vulnerable with you. That vulnerability matters in relationship. You didn't know how to handle it. So you're leaving me for another man who will not increase the odds of well-being by knowing how to be vulnerable. Because it's more important to you to protect the illusion of perfection, which you maintain by pretending that you know everything, which you maintain by rejecting anyone who brings you face to face with a reality in which your pretense is so transparent you do not believe it will be sustainable. And this hurts me because I care about you. And it also hurts me because I am being whacked in a vulnerable terrain to protect a lie that hurts both of us, that will hurt you until you deal with it. But it also reminds me of the stupidity of my cult. It reminds me of the cruelty of this protocol of raising children, and it hurts a lot. It's devastating to wonder, will I be able to find someone healthy enough to have actual love with in this cult? And it moves me to tears. And it's a big deal. Because you think algebra is really that correlated to your well-being? You think knowing the difference between a bridge in 1812 and 1818 really going to do it for you, right? When you're raising kids, when you're dealing with addiction, when you're watching the mediocrity of news, a little box, that's going to really make the difference, right? Algebra. But of course, you don't have time to talk about this. You're off to your next lesson, learning stuff, so that you can be superior in domains that are completely irrelevant to human well-being 99% of the time. So it does hurt me. And in a sociopathic cult, that boy will lose all their political rank, will be laughed at, and no girl would dream of dating them, because then she's going to be dating a sissy, someone who had the naivete to understand that their feminine self was as valuable as their masculine self, to understand that the human heart is a scientific instrument, that is a guide. And what that pain and that grief was saying was, you have just butchered your future probability field by 2/3. Meaning the you that could have told me, Dane, I'm scared of vulnerability. I'm scared of not knowing. I'm terrified of being humiliated because that has been happening by the giants in my house since I was born. I'm terrified of feeling worthless. Every boy I know in a sociopathic cult has harmed me for revealing what I didn't know. And I can't take one more hit. But I admire your courage, and I would love you to teach me how to be vulnerable and how to love, because I don't know that either. And there's a lot of pain there, and I don't know where it's from. And I feel ashamed of that as well, because I'm humiliated and hit for showing emotion at home. And I am surrounded by reptiles who will hurt me for revealing this. And I don't know how to trust you. Could you help me? You see, the one who can say that has a 2/3 higher probability field, a 3/4 higher probability field than the one who kills off love to protect the illusion of omnipotence in the belief, based on felt experience, of the sociopathic cult that is an emotionally illiterate, traumatically illiterate, shame-based high school, that are the children raised in an abuse cult that commits to emotional ignorance since birth. Every protocol leads to a probability field. The probability field has a certain amount of pain in it and a certain amount of well-being, and it has a cost. Every protocol takes a certain amount of time, a certain amount of money, a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of natural resources, a certain amount of feelings to enact. And every protocol has a yield of well-being and a yield of suffering. Intelligence is always measured by the efficiency of that yield, meaning if you consciously take very little energy to sustainably create a lot of sustainable well-being, you are highly intelligent by definition. And you will use that intelligence to pivot towards more fun and less unnecessary suffering, sustainably. And sustainably means moving towards equity and moving towards the dignity of each human being. The mathematical law for this is that even one person in trauma in a group of 100 that is unrepaired will reduce the entire energy of the 100. 1%, you can think of it as arsenic in your orange juice. I want to be healthy, okay? Good organic oranges, fresh 100% squeezed juice. You squeeze it in there, it's all ready. Then you just put a little bit of arsenic in the juice. You drink it down. 99% good, but still fatal. Trauma is a phenomena where the lowest common denominator dictates the intelligence of the cult. If you have one thief in 100, everyone has to have locks on their doors. That's the reduction to the lowest common denominator. Do you know how dumb you have to be a group of 100 and not ensure the dignity and safety of the thief? Because thieving is an absolute certainty in an abuse cult that does not ensure that each member meets their human needs. And it does not appeal when every human being knows their dignity and is optimally and empathically supported in their community to meet their human needs, to survive, to feel secure, to feel love and belonging, to become the person they want to be and earn self-esteem, to develop their unique talents, to contribute those to the world, to be honored for those contributions, experience the abundance and joy of being a valuable member of a group that loves and is loved, and the transcendence to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. These human needs are innate and are inevitable and are stupid to violate, and we do it all the time. In doing so, we induce people into trauma. And in a traumatically illiterate cult, that trauma precipitates into PTSD. And the person with PTSD in a sociopathic protocol, afraid for survival, is vulnerable as a statistical percentage. Some will kill themselves. Some will slowly kill themselves with various addictions. Some will hate and punish themselves and all that. And some will say, fuck it. What is so valuable about protecting out there in a cult that gives birth to the most innocent faces of the soul and psyche and proceeds to batter, mutilate, violate, shame, and humiliate the most sensitive sides of the psyche, often physically and sexually as well, only to dump them into the pathological stew house and torture chamber that is high school, the ignorant and professional sociopathic environment of the workplace, and then proceed to ship their jobs overseas to save a few pennies. If you don't think that level of sustained torture, cruelty, lies, and stupidity, flogging a human ego for decades is enough to induce them to say, wait a minute, why am I protecting these assholes? Why don't I steal? Why don't I kill? Why don't I make sure I survive by giving back some of the pathological cruelty that has been whipped into my body, psyche, and mind for decades? How about it? Feels good, doesn't it? They're not more valuable than me. They're not smarter than me. They're idiots. And I can steal their stuff and have their things. You see, you have to be very, very dumb to think that a certain percentage of people in a sociopathic environment will not come to this conclusion. They do, they have, and they will. So you have to be pretty dumb not to notice that or predict it. But you also have to be very stupid to allow that to happen. When all it takes is a soup kitchen of organic soup to make sure that all of our homeless have meals if they need it. When all it takes is a few open fields and some $50 Target tents to make sure that everyone has a safe, legal place to sleep. When all it takes is a nurse coming by and saying, have you completed your course of antibiotics so that we don't all get a antibiotic-resistant viral strain. When all it takes is people getting to know one another in one's community. And we refuse, pathologically insisting on a dogmatic reenactment of the abuse drama that is our cult. It is an act of cruelty, profound, malicious, painful cruelty that is all the more cruel in its straight face. Because this is called culture, this is called love, this is called for your own good, this is called all kinds of things other than sadistic, predictable incompetence leading to massive amounts of intergenerational pain that will continue indefinitely until it is responded to by an adult that is hard to find. Because what adult becomes an adult with this level of narcissistic abuse modeled by the grown-ups? Where do they come from? And how do you find one of those needles in a haystack? An actual empathic adult who loves and is loving of themselves and others enough to respond to this epidemic of disease, this epidemic of pain. And this is the crisis. This is the uncertainty. This is the unknown that we deal with as a species. Once the dynamic is understood, the map, the paradigm, is used to make a change that increases the symmetry and thus grace of the system, physically, emotionally, financially, culturally, etc. And once that response is made, there is a new probability field that is revealed in data as it becomes actual. And you track, is it a good idea? Have we made the right diagnosis? Are things getting better? And is it following the model that is not reality? The models that we use to engage with life are not real. They're not as complex as the reality we're modeling. But the question is, are they adequate? Do they reduce suffering and lead to more well-being? If so, we continue the response. We also measure. Okay, a guide dog. We create blind people in our culture. Okay, how do we fix it? A guide dog. We pay $40,000 to train each guide dog. Each guide dog lasts about 12, 15 years, something like that. Okay, so $40,000, skilled people, not enough guide dogs. Okay, that's one way to solve it. What about investing in a sonar system with an implant? Or what about an app or a sound thing that tunes into the pulses of the body? Could that be produced for $200 indefinitely and be more reliable than a dog that might or might not be swayed by bacon or something else? Could that work? What are the odds and statistics of that? Because if for $200 everyone can get one of those, and for $40,000 everyone can get one of these, you have a direction of well-being. You have a direction of intelligence. The question is, are you intelligent enough to ask the question, which is a question of empathy? Empathy is the most intelligent state known, because empathy acknowledges scientifically the truth of interconnectedness. We are interconnected, that's a truth. Empathy acknowledges that truth. Sociopathic behavior does not acknowledge the truth, so it is less effective. Any map of reality that is faulty leads to suffering. Any map of reality that is accurate leads to well-being, because reality wants us to succeed. The whole purpose of pain is a teacher. Don't go down that way. Now, if teachers are dismissed and shamed and humiliated, they say, don't go down that way, and our response is, no one's going to tell us what to do. I'm going to go ahead and ruin my life if I damn well please, and off we go. We make a response, we learn from the new probability field, and we release the energy held up in the trauma, the pain, the fear of pain. You see, all pain leads to the fear of pain. The fear of pain is pain in the past that we didn't know how to deal with, anticipated in the future because we didn't know how to deal with it. I mean, if you leave your apartment and a dog starts attacking you and you rush back in the apartment, that's not solving the problem. You've got out of the apartment, but next time you open the apartment door, your anticipation is, I didn't know how to fight that brute. I didn't know how to train that brute. I didn't know how to befriend that brute. I don't know what to do. So I have every reason to get the message in my brain, you may be attacked if you step outside the door again. So fear is the anticipation of unresolved pain in the future because we didn't resolve it in the past. In an abuse cult that shames you for acknowledging pain, meaning if you're in college and high school with a boyfriend, and you say, I am in unimaginable amounts of pain, confusion, grief, sadness. And I'm absolutely terrified because I grasp that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I also grasp that none of you do either. And you guys won't even tell me the truth. Well, the typical boyfriend in an emotionally illiterate cult will say, this woman is bringing me face to face with stuff I don't know. I don't want to look bad by not knowing in a chauvinistic cult. I better get the fuck out of here because I'm going to look bad because I don't know what I'm doing. But if I say that I'm running from feelings of my girlfriend, I will look bad as well because that's feminine too, to be afraid and to tell the truth about feelings, that's feminine. And so let's tell her her tits are too small and just not return her calls. And maybe that will hurt her enough so that my ignorance and my fear goes undiscovered. And I escaped social annihilation by annihilating one of my peers who actually loved me and was heading in the right direction. When that is the norm, you're way beyond an abuse cult. We're in pathological torture. We're in a death wish at that level of stupidity. And when not a single adult intervenes in that tailspin towards death, terror, humiliation, addiction, destruction, the virus spreads, as all emotional, psychological, and physical viruses do. And the disease takes us down. It is an adult who tells the truth in this domain. They're rare in our cult. Forgiving, releasing the energy pattern comes when we respond effectively. Now, the only way to respond effectively to very large energies, like a 3-mile river, is to collaborate. The only way to collaborate intelligently is to have an accurate map and discussion of reality, and here we run right into the abuse cult again. No one wants to acknowledge the river, how deep it is, how many people are being sucked down, particularly when we're talking about psychological terrain. 20% of us depressed? Well, let's be positive. Most of us are still in denial in the grief cycle. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? And we're frantically buying things we don't need, which is good for the economy. Isn't that wonderful? How can you collaborate to build a bridge when everyone you talk to is terrified of admitting that they don't know what to do with the river, and they're afraid of making a mistake, and they don't want to be associated with a taboo topic? Trauma, incest, sexual abuse, bullying, shaming, complete emotional illiteracy, violence, addiction. I mean, the list is endless and present. The virus is in each one of us. It may not have taken over fully. Wonderful, wonderful. We haven't killed ourselves yet. It is within each one of us. And the question is, where are the adults? Inside and out. Where are the adults who are intelligent enough to be empathic and responsible, able and willing to respond, which begins with a conversation of admission that we don't know what the fuck we're doing, or we wouldn't be doing this. Pain is a symptom of failure. Chronic pain is a symptom of chronic failure, which is a symptom of incompetence. All chronic pain is a symptom of incompetence. which is a symptom of a lack of love. The cycle of love from the masculine feminine energy is loving enough to care, caring enough to see, seeing enough to understand, understanding enough to empathize, empathizing enough to attune with understanding, empathizing enough to gather data on how effective the attunement is, attuning again, moving towards competency, towards success. At what? At creating well-being, moving towards grace. All love becomes competency, and all competency becomes love. When you succeed at bringing well-being sustainably, respectfully to another human being, they feel abundant, they feel safe, they feel joy, they feel gratitude, and they feel love, which is how the virus of love spreads. It is the most intelligent virus known to human consciousness. And there is nothing more fun in the universe for human beings than the journey from love to competency, and from competency to love, in an upward spiral of well-being and fun. It doesn't get any better, which is why anyone who knows what they're doing is learning from what? Their teacher. Pain and fear. Pain and fear are the teachers. This is the lesson, the reward, less pain and fear, and more fun.